Hey BookTube, Science Fiction Reads here with a top 10. Today I'm going to do top 10 lesser known science fiction novels, some of which admittedly are borderline lesser known. They do have a decent amount of reviews on Goodreads. People know it, but you don't see a lot of people talking about them, so I want to mention them. And some are more so recommendations of a series rather than the first book itself. And the majority of these books I have not read for years, so I've literally had to look up synopsis and reviews of these online to kind of remember why I like them so much. And this is definitely lesser known. This would be the probably least known of my books here. I'm looking at my selection. Definitely few people have heard of this, I would think. It's the Quest series by William Tedford. The first book being Rishonen Dark. Suspend your disbelief and just enjoy a wild ride of a crazy adventure. The background to this is there's some sort of threat to the Milky Way, so humanity kind of in sub-light speed ships is migrating to Andromeda, and everybody's, in cryogenic pods or whatever. So that's the background. Now, years in the future, we've got many of these different ships have made it to Andromeda, spawning all sorts of crazy offshoots of humanity. Then you got your main character, who's a guy from Earth, who's been picked up by some sort of alien intelligence. It could be a human intelligence from the future. And it kind of guides him along through the galaxy as he reconnects with different offshoots of humanity and tries to save the human race. And along the way, he meets a blue-skinned, not necessarily an alien woman, but she's certainly a bizarre offshoot of humanity, and they're kind of the two main characters, and they go on a couple crazy adventures as they save the human race. I read this a few years ago. I really don't remember much about it. I read a little bit online, but there's not much. I don't know where. I found the first book in a used bookstore and I tracked the other two down online. Yeah, these are not masterpieces. They're just fun. So that is, and they have awesome artwork too. I think you would call it the Quest series by William Tedford. Good fun. Probably not so easy to find online. They didn't cost me much. They were just hard to track down a few years ago anyway. My second recommendation, not so lesser known, Blind Sight by Peter Watts. It's just, I wish it was talked about more. It's so good. It's a first contact story, but it's more so a study on human consciousness and what if consciousness was not the norm for intelligent species? What if consciousness was kind of useless? That kind of thing. I read this in 2015 or 2016, and I still think about it like a couple times a month. It haunted me for a couple years. It challenged my worldview. Maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration, but it's really cool. Really makes you think. Next up, A Door into Ocean by Joan Slanutsky. Can't pronounce it. This one has a pacifist species, all female humans that inhabit a moon which circles a planet inhabited by a different society of humanity. And it's years after interstellar empire has collapsed. People have lost touch with other planets. Planets are starting to reconnect with one another. You've got traders and explorers from these other planets coming down to Shora, which is an ocean world. There's these islands of vegetation which the Shora people live on. And this is a pacifist society meets a warlike society, and you've got members of Shora, who are amphibious humans with a really cool culture, well developed. trying to come to terms with this aggressive people, and I guess through the eyes of the male character from the outside society, we kind of learn how to coexist, and yeah, it's really neat. I think there's 2 sequels. There's at least one. They're not directly connected. They just take place in the same universe. But yeah, this was a really good study of, human nature, different societies, and I loved the world building. Next up, Birthright, the Book of Man by Mike Resnick. This is basically a fictional history book of humanity's future, from the beginnings of space exploration to first contact, wars amongst ourselves, wars with other aliens, joining a galactic society, coming to rule that society, becoming resented by that society, and ultimately destroyed by the galactic society. Lots of cool passages in this. The final scenes with just the last 3 humans huddled in a cave, hiding from this conflict and ultimately being destroyed. And really good. I read that, and then I believe it's all tied into Mike Resnick's massive interconnected world, where a lot of his books take place in the same universe. I think few of them are actually interconnected, but they just all take place in the same universe. The other one I read would be Santiago, which is basically a bunch of mercenaries flying around the galaxy hunting down a guy who may or may not exist. And that was good too. But this was really cool, basically a fictional history book. Pretty neat. Okay, time for some cyberpunk. Vacuum Flowers by Michael Swanek. This is a book club edition. I got this for $1. No idea what it was. I just saw this nice hardcover and thought, I must own this. I had a similar experience with this as I did with William Gibson's Neuromancer, which was confusion with the prose, just sometimes difficulty understanding what's happening or what this environment looks like, stuff like that. I did come to enjoy Neuromancer by the end of it, and I had a similar experience here. But this is the recorded personality of a dead woman has become the property of a corporation that's going to sell it as an entertainment. Somehow this personality ends up in the body of a woman who rents her body out to test different technology, different software, stuff like that. And then she goes on the run with this body, but then that woman's personality starts to surface and mix with the original personality of the dead woman. So you've got these 2 personalities inside one body, and this woman's running from a corporation. Again, it's been years since I read this. I just looked up the synopsis to kind of reboot my memory. It's also kind of a crazy tour around the universe, or not the universe, the solar system, with crazy habitats out in the asteroid belt that are like giant trees, I think. It's nuts. There's a lot of crazy stuff. Like every page, I looked at my review on Goodreads for this, and I said something about every page having 3 or 4 new ideas that barely get touched on, and then he's off onto something else. I just remember absolutely loving it, even though I was a little bit confused half the time. So if cyberpunk's your thing, this is definitely one to check out. Next up, the book with the best title, The Fall of Chronopolis by Barrington J. Bailey. This one has 2 time-traveling empires that come into conflict. There's us, and there's an empire from the future. And it's 2 empires going to war with one another, and what that war looks like, which mainly consists of erasing parts of each other's empire from history, so that entire worlds, entire cultures cease to exist. Highlight of this book was like this group of historians that kept track of everything that ever existed, even if it no longer exists. So if your planet was erased from reality by the enemy empire, these guys at least wrote it down and wrote down its history so that it was remembered, which I thought was pretty cool. Their intention was to, and sometimes they did, tinker with history and with time so that these places re-existed and never didn't exist. It was pretty wild. But it was crazy. I'm pretty sure it doesn't make sense. The warfare was neat, just erasing parts of history from one another. And the final revelations were cool too. And I love the cover art. Of course, it's a Dal Yellow Spine. They all have great cover art. I don't think I've heard anyone talk about this, so definitely a lesser known sci-fi gem to check out, especially if you're into time travel. All right, this next one does occasionally come up on BookTube. I've seen it mentioned in Conquest Born by C.S. Friedman. This is just a really good space opera. Two human empires at war for generations, and two sworn enemies. You've got the female character from the more pacifist society, who's got telepathic abilities, who are at war with the other culture, and I can't remember these characters' names, but this is her sworn enemy from the other culture, and we basically explore the conflict between these two empires through these two who have multiple engagements with one another. And it's been so long I don't remember how it ends, which is great because I look forward to rereading it. Just a great space opera with absolutely great characters. If characters with depth are what you're into, then this is one to look up. I've got a few other books by this author, but I have yet to read anything by her, so I look forward to checking those out too. All right, another one that's probably not necessarily lesser known, but it's not talked about enough, in my opinion. Blood Music by Greg Bear. I have the book club edition, which has some very disturbing imagery on it. Those are ears and mouths. Are those mouths? Yeah, ears and mouths. So this one is, let's see, a geneticist who is working on making some sort of biochip or something. But he takes risks and he doesn't really follow the rules, so he's fired. He's fired for working on his own experimental side project. And he's ordered to destroy that project and leave. Instead, he injects it into his body, then leaves, continues to work on it at home, and then realizes he's created something accidentally that he had no intention of creating. I don't want to get too spoilery. This book has one of the most chilling endings I've ever read, although I was just looking at some reviews and a lot of people didn't enjoy it, but I thought it was great. And there's a really good passage in here that involves this plane flying over a vastly changed landscape on Earth. And there's a guy reporting, maybe he's reporting by radio or something, about what he's seeing and what's happening, and I think that plane goes down and it's just chilling. There's a lot of chilling scenes here. So yeah, I don't want to explain too much. I don't want to give too much away. But it's maybe not the best read during a actual pandemic, but it is good and creepy. Similar to Blindsight, which I was talking about earlier. They leave you with chills. All right, second to last, I've got Carl Schroeder's Ventus, which I have heard about. I've seen it mentioned here and there. This one's some hard science fiction. We've got a rogue AI somewhere in human space that's apparently destroyed, but not before it sends copies of itself out into space, one of which lands in this previously colonized medieval fantasy feeling world. And this world was terraformed and maintained by AI in the form of nanotechnology. It's all over the planet, but nobody's aware of that because they're simple farmers, right? And this rogue AI, one of its copies, lands on this world and starts to do some sinister stuff. Enter this badass woman whose name is, I think, Calandria May. Is that her name? Yeah, Calandria May, who feels like a Neil Asher polity agent. She's badass, and she's there to track down this AI and solve the mysteries of this world. And she's teamed up with a local kind of, is he a farm boy? He's certainly just a regular kid who gets mixed into this, and together they uncover some secrets of the world and try to avoid its destruction. I've read a couple Carl Schroeder books. Another great one that I'll recommend is Permanence. This is also like a hard sci-fi. His books are so good. Highly recommend. All right, last but not least, and talk about obscure and little known. Until I read it, I'd never heard of it, and I've maybe seen it mentioned once since then, and I've recommended it once or twice before on my channel. Stargate by Pauline Gedge has nothing whatsoever to do with the franchise Stargate. This came out first. When was this released? 1982. I have the book club edition. This is a science fantasy, and it centers around a group of gods called Sun Lords. And there's a council of Sun Lords. They all get together. They travel to each other's planets through Stargates, right? Each of them has a sun or sons, and they rule that solar system. But as the story opens, we learn one by one, these Sun Lords are being cast out of the council and banished to their worlds, with their Stargates being locked down, which I don't think has ever happened before. Stargates are being sealed. These people, or these Sun Lords, are being banished to their own worlds. Why are they being banished? One by one, they're being corrupted by some evil force. Something's getting into their heads and changing them. And this is a threat to the council, to the very existence of, I'd say, humanity, but not every world is necessarily humans. The Sun Lords are immortal, bipedal. I wouldn't say they're humans. The whole thing's like a fantasy, but it's absolutely epic. It's absolutely beautiful, this story, and tragic. This is a very sad story with a little bit of hope at the end, but really dark, sad, beautiful prose. I wish more people would read it so I could talk to somebody. It's been years since I read it, so I don't remember a lot. It's high on my list of rereads, but I have trouble committing to rereading a book when I could read something I never read before. Definitely I will be rereading this. It's absolutely epic. I'd say it's not for everybody because it's definitely science fantasy and it's pretty out there, but just the prose alone and the way it's written, it's a beautiful book. And that's it. That is my top 10 lesser known. I could do another 10 easily. Maybe I will. Lesser known science fiction books. Some of which maybe not so less known, but I wish they were higher regarded, I guess. Along with some of these authors. I have since collected a lot of Pauline Gedge historical fiction, but I haven't read any yet. But that's it. If you've read any of these, tell me what you think. Hopefully I will have, I don't know, piqued someone's interest to try some of these. And I'm sure I'll do 10 more in the future because there's lots of obscure science fiction that's just as great as the well-known stuff. Thanks for watching.